How many times in your life have you been injured? I personally have been injured more than most, and I can say most of those times I was told to RICE. RICE stands for Rest, Ice, Compress, and Elevate. What you might not know is that in 2015, the guy who came up with the RICE protocols recanted his initial claims that they were the best form of treating musculoskeletal injuries. So today we're going to kind of unpack the history of RICE and what kind of healthy alternatives you should be doing instead of RICE to get better faster. So like I said, the creator of RICE has recanted his initial claims that that was the best approach, and he did so in 2015. But I've been practicing in the field since 2016, and I can say that a lot of docs, chiros, and personal trainers and PTs that I've worked with still stick to this old school advice. So I thought I would do my part of unpacking this and really shining the light on what the best approach might be. I've also had clients recently who have been following the old school advice and it's taken them forever to get better. So I thought, why not share the truth with my clients as well so that they can get better faster? So let's get into it. So obviously age, genetics, and the severity of the injury plays a critical role in how fast somebody can recover. But I think the number one thing that you can do to recover faster is movement. Most recently, when I had a pretty severe knee injury, I was doing upwards of 200 reps a day of Patrick's reverse step-ups with a TKE band, which is like a legitimate exercise, and walking backwards either with or without resistance. And I can say that I got better much faster than the last time I had the same injury. So one article in the Sport Journal actually summarized the history of RICE and why it was dispelled really, really well. So don't take my word for it, let's just read those.
The RICE, Rest, Ice, Compression, Elevation Protocol has been the preferred method of treatment for acute musculoskeletal injuries since its origin in a 1978 publication entitled Sports Medicine Book by Dr. Gabe Malkin. These guidelines have been used by coaches and healthcare providers for over 4 decades with the intent of expediting the recovery process and reducing inflammation. Although popular, the implementation of this protocol to attenuate the recovery process is unsubstantiated. There is, however, an abundance of research that collectively supports the notion that ice and rest does not enhance the recovery process, but instead delays recovery and may result in further damage to the tissue. Research in regard to compression and elevation is inconclusive, diluted, and largely anecdotal. Definitive guidelines for the application have yet to be purported. As a result of the subsequent research that examined the validity of the protocol, Dr. Malkin recanted his original position on the protocol in 2015.
Although popular, the implementation of this protocol to attenuate the recovery process is
unsubstantiated.
So if the author of the RICE protocol doesn't back up its efficacy and RICE isn't the answer, then what is? I mean, we already discussed movement, but could anti-inflammatories be an option? No. Another article dug into this pretty hard. They said that Professor James McCormick confirms there was no evidence that non-steroidal anti-inflammatories improve the outcome of acute sports injuries or reduce swelling. Actually, they found that steroidal anti-inflammatories such as cortisone inhibit the production of collagen and granulation tissue, which is extremely important for the healing process. And another tendon surgeon, Professor Alfredson, found some pretty horrific discoveries in cortisone injection sites. He observed necrotic tissue, reduced healing, and wound breakdown after multiple cortisone injections. Yeesh. By the way, necrotic means dead. So I personally like ice, and some of my clients like ice. Is that the answer? No, unfortunately it's not. Gary Wright has written pretty forcefully that ice is also wrong and delays healing. Besides Gary, Dr. Malkin, the guy who came up with RICE, if you remember, also conceded that icing is not the best for recovery. He actually said the resulting vasoconstriction from cooling not only reduces tissue oxygenation, but in severe cases can cause necrosis, and it also inhibits the inflammatory response which is needed to initiate healing. The release of kinines and cytokines from damaged tissue is meant to increase vascular influx, which brings fibrinogen and platelets for hemostasis, leukocytes and monocytes to phagocytose, necrotic debris, and fibroblasts for collagen and protein synthesis. Wow, that is a mouthful. Basically, icing stops what your body was intended to do. So although it might make you feel better, it's not going to get you better faster. So what is the answer? Well, I kind of already hinted to it earlier. It's movement. And this is the most scientifically definitive proven method of improving your healing response. because movement increases blood flow, brings oxygen, removes metabolic waste, stimulates tissue healing, stimulates muscle growth, stimulates awesome dopamine responses, makes you happy. There's a lot of things that movement can do to make you feel better, but it also accelerates that healing response that is so important. In addition to regular movement, mechanical load also leads to the release of chemical growth factors from cells. These can enhance the synthesis of protein and structural scaffolds, which maintain, repair, and strengthen bone, cartilage, tendon, and muscle, which is kind of dope. So in other words, movement is amazing for improving recovery of a large majority of musculoskeletal injuries, maybe barring severe fractures. But I and Jennifer Robinson, the person who wrote this article, would propose that there are ways even around that. For example, people with severe leg fractures can jump in the pool and do some light pool exercise, and they can lift with their upper body from a chair. And they could do like an upper body recumbent. Somebody with an arm fracture could just reverse that. They could do recumbent biking and they could exercise their legs, right? So there's always ways to still get your movement and exercise in, even if you have a fracture in one of your bones. Now you might be thinking, what if I can only remember sound advice if it's in a really dope acronym? Well, somebody I've talked to pretty regularly, who's a physiotherapist, I believe, by the name of John Cartwright, who I think is absolutely brilliant, came up with this really cool acronym. It's peace and love. Protect early loading, emphasizing decreased bleeding and formation of a good clot. E, elevate decreased bleeding and swelling as much as possible. A, avoid anti-inflammatories because they have been shown to decrease the healing response. Maybe ice as well could go there. C, compress. Think of a wound. You're trying to get clot formation, but you don't want it too tight so that the lymphatic system can't work. E, educate. See all the advice you're about to get in love. And L, load. You need to get pain-free movement as soon as possible. O, optimism. Like Ben says, who's one of our coaches in the ATG program, he says you will heal better and be a better coach for it if you are optimistic in the recovery process. V, vascularization. Get cardio work for mind and good blood flow. And E, exercise. I think that last one is especially important because anybody can exercise. And as somebody who's had some really long recovery periods, exercise goes a really long way in just having better emotional health. And movement can be phenomenal for the recovery process, especially if you have a coach who knows his regressions and knows you. So that's it. I hope this video helps you throw some rice out the window and that we can spread more peace and love to the world. Special thanks to everyone smarter than me. In this video, it is John Cartwright, Dr. Jennifer Robinson, and Dominic and Adam who wrote one of the articles. So that's it. Until next time, peace and love, baby.